Barbara arrived in Seoul with the quiet certainty that she would not stay long. The city was beautiful in a way that felt overwhelming. Towering buildings brushing the sky, narrow streets humming with life, neon signs glowing in languages she was still learning to read. She told herself it was only a stop along the way, a place to pass through before life carried her somewhere else. Temporary places didn't deserve emotional attachment, and she had grown careful with her heart. She spent her days alone, walking for hours without a destination. There was comfort in the anonymity, in being just another face in a moving crowd. She wandered through busy intersections, quiet backstreets, and hidden corners of the city that felt untouched by time. Sometimes she sat on benches watching strangers laugh and talk, reminding herself that she didn't need connection to feel complete. Independence had become her shield, and she wore it well. That evening, the sky darkened earlier than she expected. Rain began to fall gently at first, then with steady persistence, blurring the city into streaks of light and shadow. Barbara ducked into a small cafe tucked between two narrow buildings, its windows glowing warmly against the gray outside. The door chimed softly as she stepped in, and the scent of coffee wrapped around her, comforting and familiar. She ordered a drink and chose a quiet seat near the window, letting the rain become background music to her thoughts. She watched droplets race each other down the glass, her reflection faint and distant. That was when she noticed him. He sat a few tables away, completely absorbed in a book, as if the world around him barely existed. There was something calm and grounding about his presence. He wasn't loud or attention-seeking. He simply existed with an effortless grace. The way he held the book, the relaxed stillness of his posture, the quiet focus in his eyes. It all drew her attention before she could stop herself. Barbara looked away, then back again, surprised by her own curiosity. As if sensing her gaze, he lifted his eyes from the page. For a brief moment, the cafe seemed to fall silent. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. It wasn't intense or dramatic, just a quiet awareness, like recognizing a feeling you didn't know you were missing. He offered a small, polite smile. Barbara felt her chest tighten as she returned it, her heart beating faster for reasons she couldn't explain. When the barista called her order, Barbara stood, adjusting her bag. As she turned, she nearly bumped into him as he stepped away from his table at the same time. "I'm sorry," she said instinctively. "It's okay," he replied gently, his voice calm and steady. They exchanged a few simple words about the rain, about how suddenly it had come. Nothing remarkable, nothing meant to linger. Yet Barbara noticed the way he listened, the way his attention didn't drift as she spoke. There was an ease between them that felt strangely natural, as if they'd spoken before. Then it ended as quietly as it began. He returned to his seat. Barbara collected her drink and headed for the door. Outside, the rain had softened, the city glowing under streetlights and reflections. She walked away, telling herself it was nothing, just a moment that would fade with time. But as she moved through the wet streets, she felt unsettled. Her thoughts kept drifting back to the cafe, to the stranger with the book, to the brief connection she hadn't planned for. Seoul no longer felt like just a temporary stop. Something had shifted, and Barbara couldn't yet name what it was. Only that the city she believed wouldn't matter had already begun to leave its mark on her. Barbara told herself it was coincidence. Seoul was a city of millions, after all. Running into the same stranger twice meant nothing. That's what she repeated to herself as she stepped out into the evening. The air cool and alive, neon lights flickering to life above narrow streets. Still, her heart moved a little faster than usual, as if it remembered something her mind refused to acknowledge. She was walking slowly, letting the city pull her along, when she saw him. Seo-Jun stood beneath a glowing sign, the light washing over his features in soft color. For a second, Barbara stopped, unsure whether to keep walking or turn back. Then he looked up, and recognition lit his eyes in a way that felt almost intimate. "Barbara," he said, her name sounding natural on his lips, as if he'd been waiting to say it again. She smiled before she could stop herself. "Seo-Jun." They laughed quietly at the coincidence, the sound warm and unguarded. The street around them felt narrower now, as if the city had gently closed in to give them privacy. Without planning it, they fell into step beside each other, walking with no destination in mind. Conversation flowed easily, unforced. They spoke about the city at night, how different it felt once the crowds thinned and the lights softened. Barbara found herself talking more than she usually did, her words spilling freely. Seo-Jun listened closely, his attention fixed on her, never interrupting, never looking away. When she paused, he waited. When she laughed, his smile deepened, as though it belonged there. She wasn't used to being listened to like that. There was something in his gaze, steady, open, quietly affectionate, that made her feel seen in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. She caught herself watching his expressions, the subtle changes in his eyes, the way his lips curved when she said something that amused him. Every glance lingered just a second longer than necessary. At one point, they stopped beneath a stretch of glowing lights, colors reflecting softly on the pavement. The air between them shifted, thick with unspoken feeling. Seo-Jun turned toward her, his voice lower now. "I like the way you see things," he said. "It feels honest." Barbara felt her breath catch. "You make it easy to be." For a moment, neither of them moved. The space between them felt charged, intimate. She became acutely aware of how close he was, of the warmth radiating from him, of how natural it felt to stand there with him, as if this moment had been waiting for them both. When they finally parted, it was slow, reluctant. Barbara walked home with a soft ache in her chest, her thoughts tangled in the quiet magic of the night. Later, lying awake in the dark, she replayed it all. The sound of his laughter, the gentleness in his voice, the way he had looked at her like she mattered. His smile returned to her again and again, familiar and comforting, as if it belonged somewhere deep within her. Barbara realized then that this wasn't just attraction. It was the beginning of something she hadn't allowed herself to want. And that night, for the first time since arriving in Seoul, she fell asleep smiling, wondering how a single look could feel so much like coming home. The nights began to belong to them. What started as chance encounters slowly became intention. Soft messages sent after sunset, quiet agreements made without explanation. Barbara found herself waiting for nightfall. For the moment the city slowed and Seoul revealed its gentler side. That was when she felt closest to Seo-Jun, when the world seemed to step back and give them space. They walked together beneath a sky washed in dim light, the streets calmer now, the air cool against their skin. Their steps fell into an easy rhythm, close but never rushed. Sometimes they talked about small things, the books he loved, the places she wanted to see before leaving. Other times, words faded, replaced by comfortable silence that wrapped around them like something shared. One night, they sat beneath a row of quiet streetlights, the city stretching out before them. Barbara stared ahead, gathering courage she didn't know she still had. "I don't believe in lasting love," she said softly. Seo-Jun turned toward her, his expression gentle, attentive. He didn't interrupt. He didn't challenge her words. She told him about her doubts, the way love had once promised too much and delivered too little, how she had learned to rely on herself instead, how believing less felt safer than hoping more. Her voice never broke, but her honesty felt exposed, vulnerable. Seo-Jun listened as if every word mattered. When she finished, he didn't rush to respond. He simply stayed beside her, close enough to feel his presence, steady enough to make her feel held without being touched. "Thank you for telling me," he said quietly. That was all. The simplicity of his response softened something inside her. He wasn't trying to change her mind or fill her doubts with pretty promises. He was there, present, patient, unwavering. They stood to leave, walking slowly, shoulders nearly brushing. As they moved, Barbara's hand shifted slightly, and her fingers grazed his. Neither of them pulled away. The contact was brief, accidental, yet it sent warmth racing through her. Seo-Jun's hand lingered, hesitating just long enough to give her a choice. Barbara let her fingers remain where they were, her heart pounding. Their hands stayed close, brushing again and again with each step, until eventually his fingers slipped gently between hers. No words followed. The silence between them felt full, thick with emotion, louder than any confession. Barbara felt it in the way he slowed his pace to match hers, in the way their hands fit together naturally, as if they had always belonged there. As they walked beneath Seoul's quiet sky, Barbara realized something had shifted again. Not dramatically, not suddenly, but deeply. She no longer felt alone in her doubts. And for the first time in a long while, the silence didn't feel empty. Felt like understanding. The night felt different from the moment Barbara stepped outside. There was a softness in the air, a stillness that made every sound clearer and every feeling sharper. When she met Seo-Jun, there was no need for greetings that lingered or explanations about where they were going. They simply began to walk, side by side, hands brushing now without hesitation, their closeness natural, expected. They moved through quiet streets where the city lights dimmed into something tender, their reflections stretching across the pavement. Barbara noticed how Seo-Jun walked slightly slower than before, as if he was matching her rhythm, as if he was listening even when she wasn't speaking. That alone made her chest tighten. They stopped near a small overlook where Seoul spread out below them, calm and glowing. The city felt distant, almost unreal. For a moment, neither spoke. Seo-Jun turned toward her, his eyes soft, searching her face as if committing it to memory. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. Barbara nodded, though her heart felt full in a way that made her breath uneven. "I just feel a lot right now." "I do too," he said honestly. He reached for her hand, not hesitantly, not urgently, but with intention. His fingers wrapped around hers, warm and steady, and Barbara felt something inside her loosen. She hadn't realized how tightly she'd been holding herself together until that moment. Seo-Jun stepped closer, close enough that she could feel his breath, close enough that the world seemed to quiet. His other hand lifted slowly, giving her time, brushing her cheek with a tenderness that made her eyes sting. The touch wasn't demanding. It was careful, reverent, as if he understood how fragile the moment was. Barbara leaned into his palm without thinking. The realization came suddenly and clearly. She wasn't guarding her heart anymore. He drew her into an embrace, gentle but firm, the kind that makes you feel safe rather than claimed. Barbara rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. It felt grounding, reassuring, like something she'd been missing without knowing it. They stayed like that for a long time. When Seo-Jun pulled back slightly, his forehead rested against hers. His thumb brushed softly along her jaw, and she felt every inch of the space between them disappear. "Barbara," he murmured, her name sounding like a promise. She lifted her face, and their lips met in a kiss that felt unhurried and sincere. There was no rush, no urgency, just warmth, softness, and understanding. The kiss deepened slowly, naturally, as if it had been waiting for them both to be ready. Barbara felt herself melt into it, into him. In that kiss, she felt reassurance instead of fear, certainty instead of doubt. It wasn't overwhelming. It was steady, intentional, and deeply real. When they finally pulled apart, she stayed close, her hands resting against his chest, unwilling to break the connection. Seo-Jun brushed his lips against her forehead, then her temple, whispering nothing at all. And yet, she heard everything. In that quiet moment, Barbara understood something she had never allowed herself to believe before. Love didn't need grand gestures or dramatic declarations. Sometimes, it lived in gentle touches, lingering embraces, and promises made without words. As they stood together beneath the soft glow of the city, Barbara knew one thing with certainty. Her heart was no longer closed, and in Seo-Jun's arms, it felt beautifully, fearlessly open. The days that followed felt softer, as though the world had quietly agreed to slow down for them. Barbara began waking with a strange calm in her chest, the kind that lingered long after sleep faded. The city outside her window no longer felt unfamiliar. Seoul had taken on a gentler shape, warm sunlight filtering through curtains, distant street sounds blending into something almost comforting. And somehow, Seo-Jun had become part of that calm, woven into her mornings as naturally as breath. They started meeting earlier in the day, when the city was unhurried and open. Lazy mornings found them tucked into quiet cafes, sharing warm drinks and unspoken smiles. Barbara noticed the way Seo-Jun watched her when he thought she wasn't looking. The softness in his eyes, the quiet appreciation that made her feel cherished without being overwhelmed. There were stolen glances across tables, fingers brushing as they reached for the same cup, laughter exchanged in hushed tones. None of it felt rushed or forced. There were no labels spoken, no expectations laid out. Yet everything between them felt certain in a way Barbara had never known. She caught herself doing unfamiliar things, staying longer than planned, lingering instead of leaving, imagining tomorrow with him in it. The beliefs she'd carried for years began to shift, not because she argued with them, but because they no longer fit the way she felt. Love wasn't fragile here. It didn't feel like something that could disappear overnight. With Seo-Jun, love felt steady, felt safe. They spent afternoons walking without destination, letting the city reveal itself slowly. Sometimes they talked for hours. Other times they said very little at all. Silence no longer made Barbara uneasy. With him, silence felt like closeness, like understanding without explanation. One afternoon, they sat together by a quiet street, sunlight warming their skin. Seo-Jun reached for her hand absent-mindedly, his thumb tracing slow circles against her palm. The gesture was small, intimate, and it made her heart ache in the sweetest way. "You seem different," he said gently. Barbara smiled, thoughtful. "I feel different." She realized then that she wasn't waiting for love to fail. She wasn't bracing herself for the moment it would slip away. Instead, she was letting it exist, fully, honestly, without fear. At night, when she was alone, she found herself replaying moments instead of guarding against them. His smile, the way he said her name, the quiet certainty in his presence. She imagined mornings she hadn't planned for, days she hadn't scheduled, a version of herself that wasn't always preparing to leave. For the first time, staying didn't feel like losing herself. Felt like choosing something real. Barbara stood one evening at her window, watching the city glow below. Seoul no longer felt like a place she would pass through and forget. It felt like somewhere she could belong, because of him, because of the way her heart felt when she was with him. And in that quiet realization, Barbara understood something that both thrilled and terrified her. She wasn't just falling in love. She was allowing it to stay. The night was calm in a way Barbara would have once found unsettling. She stood beside Seo-Jun at a quiet overlook, the city stretching endlessly beneath them. Lights scattered like stars, streets humming softly in the distance. Seoul felt distant now, almost unreal, as if it had gently stepped aside to give them this moment. The breeze was light, carrying the quiet warmth of a night that felt carefully chosen. Seo-Jun stood close, his presence steady and familiar. Barbara rested against him, her head near his shoulder, listening to the slow rhythm of his breathing. There was no rush between them anymore. No uncertainty, just a deep, peaceful knowing. She exhaled slowly. "There's something I need to say." Seo-Jun turned toward her, his expression soft, patient. "Take your time." Barbara looked out over the city, gathering the words she had avoided for weeks. Not because she didn't know them, but because saying them meant surrendering completely. "I didn't believe in love," she said quietly. "Not the kind that lasts. Not the kind that stays gentle even when it's real." She swallowed, her voice steady but full. "I thought love was loud, fragile, something that demanded too much and disappeared too easily." She turned to face him, her eyes shining. "But you didn't come into my life that way. You didn't rush me. You didn't ask me to believe in anything I wasn't ready for." Seo-Jun's gaze never left her face. "You just stayed," she continued. "And somewhere along the way, I stopped guarding my heart. I didn't even notice when it happened." Her lips curved into a soft, emotional smile. "I didn't believe in love. Until you." Seo-Jun reached for her, pulling her gently into his arms. He rested his forehead against hers, his voice low and full of certainty. "I never wanted to convince you. he said. I just wanted to be here with you. Barbara closed her eyes, breathing him in. In his embrace, everything felt settled. Oh, right. Seo-Jun stepped back slightly, still holding her hands. There was a quiet shift in his expression. Something intentional, deeply sure. Before she could ask anything, he slowly lowered himself onto one knee. Barbara's breath caught. Barbara, he said, his voice calm but emotional. Meeting you changed the way I understand love. With you, everything feels honest, steady, real. He reached into his pocket and revealed a simple, elegant ring that caught the city's light. I don't want a life where you're just a beautiful chapter. I want every day, every quiet moment, every future we haven't imagined yet with you. Her hands trembled as tears filled her eyes. Will you marry me? For a heartbeat, the world disappeared. Then Barbara laughed softly through tears, nodding as emotion overwhelmed her. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will. Seo-Jun rose and pulled her into a kiss filled with warmth, certainty, and promise. The city below them blurred into nothing as they held each other, the future unfolding gently between their hearts. Days later, Seo-Jun brought her to a beautiful, welcoming home filled with warmth and laughter. His family greeted Barbara with open smiles, curiosity, and kindness. His mother held her hands warmly, his father nodded with quiet approval, and the room filled with a sense of belonging Barbara never expected to feel so far from where she was born. As Seo-Jun introduced her proudly, the woman I love, the woman I chose, Barbara felt something settle deep within her. She hadn't come to Seoul looking for love, but love had found her anyway, softly, patiently, and forever. And in that city she once believed wouldn't matter, Barbara found not just love, but home. Thanks for watching Folktales by Queen Dora. For more interesting stories, please click on the subscription button.